Here to make sense of it all, live from Davao City, economist George Manzano of the University of Asia and the Pacific. He previously served as member commissioner of the Philippine Tariff Commission. It's good seeing you again, George. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for the invitation,
Right,
Kathy.
so it must
Happy to
have
be
been
here.
a very interesting last 72 hours since the U.S. Supreme Court's decision declaring Trump's tariffs illegal, George.
Yes, never a dull moment.
Never a,
Actually,
yeah.
yeah.
But does it sort of, deja vu? Same time last year, it was just about the same that we worried a lot about those tariffs.
That's right. But the current development is basically gives a different light to what we consider as the new normal. After 1 year, basically the world has settled into the new normal of living with reciprocal tariffs. And now that's been changed with the Supreme Court ruling that these reciprocal tariffs, you know, uh, President Trump overstepped his authority in imposing tariffs, and basically he has to rescind those. Except the new normal will not be the status quo before reciprocal tariffs. Basically, the new normal is that we're going to live in a global trading system which will be full of uncertainty, and just a few hours or after the Supreme Court decision, and as you mentioned, we have this across the board global tariffs of 10, now 15%. Now that's the new normal.
It is.
And
So the new
yeah.
normal at 15%, but we're still at 19. If we make out what 4% means, does that mean we're at a disadvantage versus other ASEAN nations?
No, in that sense that the new normal is across the board. So all countries are subjected to it. So it's just like lifting the average. No, it does not discriminate one country from another. Then all countries are hit with a 15%. So in terms of ranking and competitiveness to market access to the US, it remains the same, basically. But there's uh, there will be across the board tariffs now of 15%.
So given that everybody's now going to have to face 15% across the board, does that even the playing field then for us, for the Philippines?
Well, the big question really is that are we better off under this global tariff compared to the reciprocal tariffs? And the answer to that depends on whether this Section 122 global tariffs will have will give us the same exemptions as we enjoyed during the reciprocal tariff era when we negotiated, where almost half of our exports to the US, semiconductors, and some agricultural products were exempted, from the reciprocal tariffs. If those exemptions are not going to be retained under the global, under Section 122, then we would, I think, be worse off in that regard.
So that's what the government needs to do, George, is to fight for status quo. Whatever we got in the first round of the tariffs, now nullified by the Supreme Court, is something that we could live on, exporters could work on going forward?
Yes, that is something that we could definitely work on, but that's still a bilateral deal with the United States. So you have now 122, but that's just good for 5 months. Then I think President Trump will continue to search for legal instruments to replace the reciprocal tariffs, and I think there's mention of Section 301 and 232. Now, Section 232 has something to do with the U.S. administration imposing tariffs in a response to threats to national security. And indeed, they have done that with steel, aluminum, copper, maybe critical minerals, automotive, even timber. So the issue here is whether we export those products that are likely going to be targeted by the Section 232 perhaps after some time when the Section 1, the global tariffs would have ended. And I think no, I think we're not a big producer of steel nor aluminum. We don't export soft timber. We're not a big producer of even cabinets to the US, unlike Vietnam, nor are we a very big exporter of automobiles to the US. So in terms of Section 232, I think it's highly unlikely that we will be hit badly compared to other countries. The other legal instrument that the President Trump is thinking of using to replace reciprocal tariffs after perhaps the Section 122 global tariffs would have run its course is Section 301, which is basically, giving the U.S. administration the leeway to impose tariffs when they feel that they're subject to, let's say, unfair trade practices. Their partners do not honor their agreements. Their partners basically steal intellectual property. So that is more country specific. But our bilateral trade relationship with the U.S. is basically, we're not a big player there. We don't enjoy a very sizable trade deficit with the U.S. Nor are we, there are threats that or insinuations that we're stealing intellectual property or we're not honoring our WTO contribution regulations to the United States. We are not a threat to the U.S. when it comes to unfair trade
Which
practices.
brings
So,
us to
yeah,
diversification, George. We've had a year to do that. How much have we done so far in your assessment? And how protected are we from the fact that if we did diversify enough, whatever the U.S. does won't hurt us so much?
I think we're well. Credit to our government officials. We've been exploring. We have the UAE, then we're in talks, deep in talks with the European Union. Now we are exploring possibilities with Canada. That should be our long-term solution, with or without Section 122 or Section 301. It will be like a dominant strategy that we need to do regardless of what the United States, because it will give us some bit of certainty, when it comes to trade. At the moment, trade with the United States is full of uncertainty. This new normal, you know, just as we think we're already settling in the
Okay.
new normal, then there are these new issues that come up,
All
and
right.
business would like really to have a predictable environment.
Well, it helps to know 101 on trade policy there. Thank you so much for your insights. George Manzano of UANP and the former member commissioner of the Philippine Tariff Commission.